Do it here. Oh, there it is. Great. Okay, awesome. All right, so we are recording this session. Let's see. I have an email that someone's trying to get into the meeting, but oh no. All right. So thank you all for joining us. So I wanted to start off by uh, saying it's great that you guys have taken the time to get together and talk about anything related to Talent Search or EOC proposal writing. We're here to answer your questions. Do we have any questions right now in the Q&A, or anybody wants to, we can unmute you and you can go ahead and ask your question. Anyone? I don't think we got any questions this week, did we, Donna, that I missed?
The only one I saw was just kind of a recap of the timeline for grant writing, uh,
Okay.
basic
Okay.
outline.
Great. Well, the timeline, I shared, it's in the Google Drive, and I don't know if one of y'all wants to put that link in the chat. In the chat, you're going to see, and you should get it every time you are reminded about this meeting, but we've established a Google Drive just for these webinars. And I put stuff in there, and every week I put some more items in there. Um, and one of the things we did was for both EOC and Talent Search, we put a timeline of when you should start working on items. And I know for right now, you want to start working on your data collection. I'm sorry, let me start over. You want to start working on your budget. The budget is the most important thing for both Talent Search and EOC. We have the poorest budgets in all of Trio. Okay, right? And you can probably relate to that. Very, very little money. So, doing the budget for year one of the first year in the grant, that's all the grant wants, but you should actually do a 5-year forecasted budget so you can see in the future where the money's going to run out. If you have everybody on board, thank you so much. If you have everybody on, if you keep everybody employed, and you're at full staffing capacity, which you know you need to be in order to make this stuff happen, you should see that in year two, so your money's going to start to run out, or to what I mean is it's not going to keep pace with the federal funding that increases that we get. Insurance is going to go up and things like that. So definitely, if you're going for new funding, you want to make sure you do a 5-year forecasted budget, plug in at least 10 to 15% increase in insurance, and only a 4% at best increase in how much money we're going to get from from the department every year. All right. I know the grant just wants the first year, but remember that first year can't have any carryover. So it should take you an hour, no more than an hour, to do your year one budget, assuming that whatever you have right now, if you're an existing project, whatever you're getting right now for 24, 25, just assume that's what your first year budget is going to be, and it's going to maximize at that amount. Okay. No carryover. All right. I anticipate that yes, there'll be an increase. Um, higher, but it's always easier to put a little bit more money in than to take money out. So that's the first thing you do is you do your budget. Shouldn't take you that long at all. And for those of you that are attending that are going for new funding, honestly, good luck trying to make that budget work with 100% director. Anybody going for new funding, you will not get funded if you don't have 100% director in there initially. You can try to ask later after you, if you're lucky enough to get funded, to maybe be split, but it's not a guarantee, and you may have to stay 100% director. So it's really tough to pay for that. So after the budget, then you want to do the data collection and start making sure your target schools and your target area still shows need in all these areas. And that doesn't happen overnight. And then at the same time, going on, after you do the budget, when you're collecting data, someone there needs to be updating the applicant and community support section, making sure those partners are still going to be partners. For talent search, a lot of things have happened the last 5 years where you may, instead of being able to get a letter from your principal, they may say, oh, you know what? I can't do that anymore. It's got to go to the district level, and they want an MOU. And I think, double check me, ladies, but I think if one of y'all can remind me, I do have and I think I did it, but I do have a template for an MOU, and some letters of support for both EOC, mainly for Talent Search, but EOC, you can take that if you need it and tweak it. But I'll make sure you have those. The um, applicant and community support section and the needs section data, those are two sections in the proposal that are totally out of your control. And that will take time to prepare, to develop, to go back and forth, to confirm. So those have to start right away. The other sections of the proposal, once you get the budget done, you could crank those out in a weekend. You don't want to have to do that. But there's certain sections that you need to start working on now. And you can see all the other sections here, how we talk about what to work on in the summer. And we revisit, check in with this, check in with that. We are acting at NEC, we are acting like this is going to be due for Talent Search for sure. I mean, at least for Talent Search, not for sure, but for Talent Search, I'm preparing myself to be ready to submit at the end of September if I have to. I could be wrong. This is pure speculation. I could be wrong. It could be pushed back further, but I got to be ready for the end of September. And pretty much the same for EOC, maybe a month later at most, end of October. And I could be totally wrong. It could go back to what it used to be 5 years ago when it was due in February, and I think the beginning of March. But anyway, that's the timeline we're using. You'll see that there's one for Talent Search and there's one for EOC. Are there any other questions? Those letters
Yes.
of, yes, go ahead, Teresa.
Okay, so one of the questions that we have is, and I know some elements of this, but I didn't want to misspeak. Do we still think it is going to be a $536 per participant cost?
Is that that amount stated? Is that from from 2021's? I don't have it open in front of me, or is that what you currently have right now? And I'm pretty much asking the person who asked the question. Are they referring to their current one or to the 2021 stated one? Cost per participant. I either way, I know it's gonna have to be higher than the 2021. Okay, that's
Mhm.
stated there.
She said current,
Oh, current.
just the current
Okay,
amount.
current. I believe it's going to stay the same. Okay, so great question. For those of you that are currently funded, I believe that cost per participant will stay the same, and the number of people that you're funded to serve will stay the same. Okay, I do think it's going to stay flat, like it was for another competition, but I could be surprised. I can't remember which competition it was. I think it might have been student support services, where we were thinking it would stay flat, so we just anticipated what it was. By the way, keep in mind that you all have not received your grant award notifications for your last year of funding, which starts in September, right? So really, you'll have to update this draft budget that you're basing off of what you're getting today at that cost per participant. You'll have to hopefully when you get your GANs later this summer telling you what you're going to get for 25-26, right? For 25-26, I'm hoping there'll be an increase. All right. So that increase will make everything go up. Your budget will go a little bit up, maybe by 4%, which means your cost per participant will go up by 4%. So there is a best case scenario is that your next year's budget will be a little bit higher, hopefully 4%, and cost per participant will go up. And then that budget that you're drafting today for the first year of the grant budget, you'll have to tweak it slightly so that it matches the budget that you're going to get for your last year of funding and that cost per participant. Okay, but that's pure speculation. For SSS, when the final RFP came out, they actually gave us a little bit more money. So, but that was a pleasant surprise. It's like I said, it's always easier to add money in than to take it out. So that was a great question. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Teresa?
No, but there's a add-on to that particular question,
Okay.
that may be helpful. So the other part of the question, which was added is, and what is your suggestion as far as what the percentage of our personnel for our entire budget? I'm working on my budget, and after everyone is paid, I won't have much for service, so I'm trying to adjust.
Correct. And you know what? In Talent Search and EOC, out of again all the TRIO programs, there's really I can't really make a suggestion because it is what it is. Don't you hate that answer? Because HR, you have to pay people a certain amount, right? You have to. And you have to pay your director and your advisors through the classification of whatever HR says they have to be paid for their titles and their duties and responsibilities. Those are what we call fixed costs. You can't mess with those. So you have to, number one, pay them. And then your fringe benefits, although they fluctuate because of the marketplace and costs of insurance going high every year, you can't adjust those. So I can't give you a recommendation of how much you should spend on staff and fringe, except that you better have that covered. When that's said and done, it'll probably be close to 80 to 85% of your budget, right? So your federal funding through the federal funding for both Talent Search and EOC, if when you do your budget, you notice that, oh my gosh, 85% of all my money isn't making sure I have enough staff and fringe benefits, then you're right on track. That is not, you're not like, oh my God, what am I doing wrong? You're doing nothing wrong. That's how it is. So that's why to pay for supplies, staff travel, forget about student travel, but just to pay for everything else, computers and things like that. Yeah, you probably have just a few dollars, 10% left to pay for all that. So that even in year one, so that means your college or your agency has to step up and fill the void, because we know we can make it happen, right? You've been making it happen, and you've been basically, everybody here, is, I mean, most of us that are attending that have existing programs, the way we've been making it work is because we have been using carryover from year to year to year. If you didn't have carryover, though, you would have been going back to your agency or college and saying, look, I don't have any money for supplies. I can't pay for my database program. I mean, those are that's the reality of it. If everybody was employed, I guess we're lucky that we've had gaps in personnel so that we have this extra money to cover those costs. But moving forward, that year one budget cannot include any carryover. So you got to make it look like you can make it last with the 10% that you have left over in categories such as supplies. Don't feel bad if you don't have any money for student travel. Don't feel bad if you don't have any money for staff travel. Okay. In reality, you'll be able to make it work because we always have carryover every year, no matter how well we plan. But since this budget expects to have everyone on board 100% for the first year, it is going to be very tight. And you may have to ask your college to cover the cost of your computers or your database or some other supplies. They may have to start committing to that as matching, in a way, matching funds to make it happen. Now, a word of caution about that. If you say your college is going to pay for your computers or, supplies in the grant as their applicant and community support to make the budget look like you can afford everybody and everything, then I've got to caution you that once you get up and running, and let's say you do have carryover, and you go, oh, guess what? I have carryover because so and so wasn't here, or they left early, or whatever. Whatever. I have carryover now. A trip got canceled, whatever. I'm going to use that to buy, computers, or I'm going to let the college know they're off the hook. They don't have to pay for that stuff anymore because I've got carryover. Nope, because once you tell or say that they're going to pay for your computers or your database training, even if you come up with money, extra money that you can use toward it, you can't use it toward that because it's already written that they would pay for it. So that's the other issue I want you to be aware of. You can't, and you don't want to put them in a position where you could say, well, just say you're going to cover it, but I'm going to have carryover. You won't be held to it. Yeah, they will be held to it. They will be held to that. So once you say they're going to cover something, then they're going to have to. Another way, I will make a recommendation, and it's a tough one. It really is. But you may have to think about keeping critical staff, which is your director and your advisors, and any supporting staff, like an administrative assistant or clerical clerks, or data entry people that you have on board right now. They may not make the cut. You may not be able to afford them, so that you have supply money and other money to make it look like you have enough money for the other things in the budget category. Again, a reader will be looking at your entire budget, and you could tell them that, please note the majority of our funding is for personnel and fringe because they're our most important resource. Without them, we can't identify, recruit, and select students, provide services. The rest of the budget, will be there to provide them with technology and supplies to provide. But it's not a very fancy budget at all. That's why it takes an hour to do it, because there's very little money in it. So I can't recommend, except you have to go by what your college says you have to pay your staff and your benefits. I will recommend that you look at any non service providing staff, like administrative assistants or clerical clerks, that they may not make the cut. You may have to cut them out of the budget completely. I don't know if you wanted to add to that, Teresa, if there's any other follow-up questions about that.
No, you answered it great. And so the only other, someone made a statement which kind of aligns with what we're talking about. Donna said that she plans on cutting her numbers, but she realizes that she will cut the budget as well. It will be tight.
Yes. So you can't go down, and if you can go down in numbers, but then you have to ask for less money. So that won't work. And then we had somebody attend a grant writing workshop that they were writing for new programs. And so they were initially thinking, oh, well, once we had this conversation, well, I'll just, instead of asking for 850 students at this rate, I'm going to ask for 1,000 at the cost per participant. And if I ask for more students, I can make it work. It'll be tight. And I said, you know what? I understand your rationale. And typically that would be a good thing. That would be a good strategy. Except guess what? Whether you're new or continuing, the department doesn't allow you to ask to serve more, or or allow you to ask for more money because you're serving more students. You can go down, but you cannot, as a new applicant, you're maxed out at 850 at whatever the budget is going to be stated in the program application. You can't ask for $1 more. Your grant won't be read. And the same thing with existing programs. You cannot ask to serve more to get more money. And they don't recommend you ask to serve more with the same money, right? That defeats the purpose. So you're locked in. Now, I could be wrong that when the program application comes out, maybe they decide, like, Teresa, like Europe does, they never tell you how many, how few or how many students you should serve. They say, hey, it's $800. You could serve 500 kids, 100 kids, or you could serve, 10,000, right, Teresa? But it's $800 cost for participant. Right, Teresa, I wish we had that kind of leeway, but we've so soon discovered with Gear Up that with Gear Up, you have to serve at least 1,500 students to break even.
Right.
So, right? So a lot of them are serving more because they need it, but they can do that. Maybe, Teresa, maybe they'll treat Talent Search and EOC that way, where they'll tell them, you know what, this is your flat rate, not 800, but maybe they'll say, okay, you know what, it's gonna be 500, you decide. That's a different story, right? So, but what we have right now are kind of locked in. So you can't ask to serve anymore. You could go down, but if you go down, you're going to actually lose fund, ask for less money. It's all about the money, y'all. It really is. And that's why I say do the budget first. For anybody thinking about doing this brand new, I hate to be a downer, but I got to keep it real and let you know that it is super tough to afford this program. If you really want it bad, then your college is going to have to agree to basically give you money starting in the first year, and more so in the second, third, fourth, and fifth year, because this money that you get from the feds is only enough to pay for salaries, and barely. In some places, we're seeing programs that have been around for a while. It's not enough money because they had to do a mandatory increase across the board. And great for the staff. Everyone's like, yay, we got our raises. Yay, we got this big, thing to make us equal and pay to everyone else in the state. And then they realize, oh no, we're going to have to ask the college to pay for part of that salary of fringe benefit increase because we're no longer getting enough from the federal funding. So it's almost like EOCs, more so Talent Search, not as much, but EOCs really have to have a college or agency that's willing to put in cash every year. Okay. So do the budget, please. Don't get everyone excited about a new EOC until you agencies. Can you continue to afford it? It's a tough conversation to have, but you want to do this now where you have time to go back and forth to think about it rather than wait until the program application comes out and you've got 45 days to not only write, collect data, and make decisions. You want to have that conversation now with the right people at your agency or your college to ensure that, look, I want you to know this is how tight the money is, and it's going to get worse in subsequent years. I got to know if you guys are on board with this. Okay. Otherwise, we have to come up with another plan. Do it now so you don't have to do it when you're strapped for time. Are there any other questions?
Yes. So the next question is, what if we are an existing program but need to decrease the number of schools?
And this is Talent Search. Okay, well, a lot of things to decrease number of schools. I'm guessing it's because the travel, or maybe some of them are not being cooperative. So if you're an existing Talent Search, you want to make sure, number one, confirm how many target schools are officially on listed for you all with the Department of Ed. And that would have come from, number one, your program profile form from the last competition for 2021. How many schools? That's the big deal. You got to confirm they have 10 schools, for example, listed for us. And also it would be on your APR that you just turned in. Double check that to make sure. You want to make sure. Sometimes people get confused, or we we go to them so often, we get mixed up and think we have 15 target schools, and we only really have 10, but we kind of considered it. So number one, find out how many official target schools the Department of Ed has on file for you. Then you cannot just totally revamp all those schools, the number. The regulation state, and Teresa, you found this last time. I remember you looked it up for us because we had a question about this last time. But I believe the wording is you must serve substantially the same number of target schools was the wording.
Yes.
Yes, right?
That's correct.
In the program application, which is kind of vague, right? Substantially the same. Well, I'm just going by what COE's interpretation was, that you want to keep them at 51% or higher. That's their guideline of your total schools. So I don't think I'd go down to 51%, substantially the same number of schools. But if I had 10 schools, and again, I guess you're saying that if you're trying to reduce the number of schools, you've already done a needs assessment to find out which ones are no longer showing need. Or there's got to be some reason why you're doing your SWOT analysis as to why you've got to lower the number of schools. Otherwise, you wouldn't be asking the question. So maybe it's got some strengths and weaknesses, but when it's all said and done, on all 10 schools, if that's how many you have right now, for everybody out there, whether you get 10, 8, 17 schools, do an Excel spreadsheet and start collecting the data for all of them. And then if you want to reduce schools, well, if you start with 10, I could go down to 6 if I have to, right? 10 to 6 is still 51% or higher of my original. But so that means I could go down 4 schools possibly, but I got to be strategic of which schools. They may not be the 4 schools that I want to get rid of, because maybe those 4 schools are showing more need than the schools that I want to keep. So it's a 2-part question. Can I, of the schools that I think because they're too far away or not being cooperative, I want to bless them and let them go, so to speak. So you're almost hoping that when you pull the data that they're not showing on the spreadsheet that they have the most need, or you're almost hoping, oh, they don't show need anymore, because that feeds into my rationale, my reasoning as to why I should let them go. They don't show need anymore. So do your spreadsheet, start collecting data on all your existing schools. That must guide you on which schools to bless and let go, rather than the cooperation part of it or other factors. Because if you go down, like I said, you want to keep at least 51% or higher, and again, I'd have to know your individual circumstance and all that good stuff, but just as a general advice, when you're lowering, going down, you can't go too far down because you risk possibly losing your prior experience points added on to your proposal, and you don't want to mess with those. So that's the big deal. The second big deal is when you decide to lower your number of schools, you got to look, you got to make sure that the schools that you're keeping are still showing a need across the board in all the tables in the need section. And sometimes, like I said, the schools you want to bless and let go are the ones you're kind of stuck keeping because they show the most need. And the ones that you want to work with the most are not showing enough need. So you may have to get rid on paper if you're going to lose schools, some of your favorite schools, because they're not showing need either in all the categories or in some of the categories. So just like you got to do your budget first, you got to do a needs assessment on all your existing schools as fast as possible and start ranking them in order of need, and that will lead your decision. Once you decide which ones need to go, then the answer is you need to keep at least 51% or more, 51% and more of your existing target schools that the department has on file for you. That could change though. We maybe they'll give us some additional insight or regulate guidance on that. And as soon as I find out, I will let you all know. Do we have another question?
Yes, so we have two EOC questions.
Great.
So Sharon asks, she says, years ago, I combined the educational specialist and admin position. She has less targeted numbers to serve and handles the database. So she's giving some feedback on how she combined the position.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
so just to share.
That would be great. And then you know what? Actually, most of the when we write up most of the grants we write, because they can't afford an admin, we have maybe 2 or 3 advisors. And part of their duties and responsibilities, each advisor is to establish their own files, to enter and do their own database entry of new participants, and to do their own entry of services provided. So that's just part of their duties and responsibilities because there's no admin at all and they still have a caseload. So that's one way you could do that too, is where, hey, Teresa, remember back in the day, we didn't have any admins, right? We were Talent Search with Survey 800.
Yep.
With the 3 of us, none of us had. We were it. We were admin. We were advisor. We were sometimes a house cleaner, cleaning up our own offices and stuff like that. There was just no money in it, so it just needs to be incorporated in their duties and responsibilities. Is there another one?
Yes. So the other EOC is actually a question. We are a new EOC program that was funded in year 2 of the current grant cycle. How will this impact the refunding process, if at all?
You just go ahead. Okay, a couple of things there. You have funding that will cross over where everyone else is going to run out of funding because their timing runs out. Your timing is a little different. It cuts into the next competition, but you have to write along with everybody else. So everyone's writing, that money's running out, and you have another, I guess maybe you started in the 2nd year, so you've got maybe 2 more years on your existing funds. You still have to submit. So I guess maybe it's no impact, Teresa. They would have to submit and do a year 1 budget, the same thing that everyone else does. It's just, I guess the what's the word I'm looking for? Behind the scenes, the accounting of it is a little different. Would you agree, Teresa, that because they're off cycle?
Yes. So as far as them actually getting funded, there's no impact there. It's just the semantics, the administrative elements will actually be impacted from the Department of Ed's perspective, but it wouldn't impact your program.
It's like yes, that's the word I was looking for. It's an accounting thing. You would still, while everyone else, let's say everyone gets refunded, they would be working off of new money in their new bank accounts, and you would still be working off of your old bank account for a couple of years until your new money kicked in. But whatever percentages, whatever new objectives that you set come into effect right away. Does that make sense? So even though you are working off of old money until your new money cuts in, just like everybody else, when everyone finds out they've been awarded and here are your approved objectives from what you put in your proposal, then you are held accountable to perform on those objective percentages now, not 2 years later when your new money kicks in. Is that clear as mud? It's crazy, but old money, but new objectives. So there's no impact.
Right.
Okay. What else do we got?
So here's another question. This goes back to the changing out the change in schools or decrease in
Mhm.
target schools.
Uh-huh.
So the question is, so we can replace schools to keep the recorded number or do not go below 50%.
They want you to keep the substantially the same. So they just don't want you to swap out schools. So it's a combination, right? When I read that, Teresa, I don't know if you interpret it.
Yes.
I'm,
Mhm.
it's like these are your 10 friends. You're gonna have to keep most of the same friends. Okay, so you can go down, but they don't necessarily want you to swap them out just to keep the same number, if that makes sense, with new friends, with new target schools. Is that how you read it, Teresa? I don't know if you got any input on that.
Yeah, so let me read this again.
You could always
Yeah.
add schools. I don't recommend it unless it's I usually don't recommend it. I would have to know your stats, your budget. If you're having a tough time getting enough students at your 10 schools, um, you might want to go higher. If you're rural, it's just with travel costs, it's really tough. What do you Were you able to see anything else in the question?
Yeah, so basically it's less about replacing school. It's about what's more important is that you're keeping the same target schools, which is why they are saying substantially that you're staying substantially high.
The
That
same.
50% threshold is very low to me.
Mm-hmm.
My threshold was 75 to 80%.
Yep.
If I had six schools, we were probably replacing one.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason we were doing the replacement was because it was difficult to get access to students or something of that sort. But I think it's more discouraged. It's more of a discouraging element of decreasing the schools. Well, I mean, not decreasing the schools. No, it's more of a discouragement of switching out schools and replacing schools. But as far
I
as
agree.
yeah, exactly, exactly. But
I,
as
I,
far as the number of schools, it's very difficult to decrease the number of schools because of the substantial piece. So it is two parts to it.
Yeah, it's a two-part thing, just like the low income first, with some
Mhm,
of our other programs, it's like you got to have your numbers and you got to have 2/3 low income first generation, usually most of the
mhm.
time. So, and you're right, Teresa. I'd probably be more conservative this time around and probably say, well, you know what, I'll keep 75% of the same schools. The COE has always said more than 50%. So, more than 50%, which yeah, might be too low. And again, if you've got to, for whatever reason, have to reduce for whatever budget, travel, you know, uh, I would make sure to do the data collection that would help you decide. But what this rule is for is so that you don't totally revamp and just pick up and go someplace else that shows more need across the board, because they don't want you to abandon a target area basically. But if in reality, if you've been in the same target area forever and ever, you would think you'd see some change going on there. But when it comes in, what I usually run into situations is where one of my target schools is no longer showing need. So it's not that I didn't want to continue to serve them. It's just that they no longer show need. So instead of having 10 target schools, I may leave them off officially and say I only have 9. But because that previously what was a target school is still in the target area, I could still continue to serve students from that school that is now going to be a non-target school because they are in the target area. The definition of a target school is the focus of your identification, recruitment, selection, and serving of students. It means I need to go to them more frequently. I need to have students enrolled at my target schools more than at a non-target school, but that non-target school must be in the target area. So that's one way you can have your cake and eat it too. if you've got to reduce your numbers for whatever reason, mainly because they're not showing need, I can lose a couple of schools, keep everybody the same. I went from 10 to 8. And you know what? I could still go there to those 2 target schools if I need more numbers, or to follow up and finish off serving the existing students that started as new and now they're continuing. Except I want to make sure on my calendar and my schedules that I'm not going to them as frequently as I go to my official target schools. So again, the data collection
Yep.
comes into play. Okay.
And the person said, thank you, they got it. So
Okay.
thanks.
Great. Any other questions?
We have one more.
Okay.
This question is, our TRIO programs are housed in our Center for Multicultural Access and and Success Department. Will the department's title, specifically multicultural, be an issue in the application with the new administration?
Well, Teresa, we're knee deep in those reviews. If you want to speak to that, and I can chime in on what I think might happen, but you would think that the college would be worried about that right now for any kind of funding, don't you think? The title.
Yeah, you would think so, but there's two elements of this. If that's what the unit is called, um, that's interesting.
Aren't
If
some
that's what
people? Yeah,
if
aren't some
that's what the
people
unit is,
changing?
yeah, some people are changing it. Um, I know that when I've ran across that through the reviews, it was usually a partner or somebody like that that was doing it. It wasn't necessarily through the chain of command when I said that they may want to
Oh,
rethink
you
the
mean?
title. But I
Mm-hmm.
have a problem with saying change the title of your organizational structure to be called something else. But it could potentially raise a flag,
Yes.
and we're just not sure what the flag looks like because we don't know what all of the definition is of DEI. There's no specific parameters around it, so it could potentially flag your proposal with that particular terminology in it.
So if it's the unit that you're reporting to, I'm thinking that you might want to start a conversation with your PI, I guess your principal investigator that is someone within that department. Again, what is the conversation about? Is that department going to keep their title, or are they going to also possibly change it so that they wouldn't have to worry about any potential having to explain, that kind of thing? Um, that's a good conversation to start having. If for some reason they're saying, nope, that's what we are, we're not changing it, nothing, well, then in the plan of operation, where the question comes up about the project's organizational placement within the institution, you can there's wording that we can utilize, and Teresa, you're familiar with the wording that we've recommended when it's come to the multicultural events being spelled out. There's a way to say please note that the eligibility and services, students that are considered eligible and to receive services would be Talent Search or EOC eligible. And you could throw in the GEPA thing that there's no regard to, discriminating upon selection. So you could put a reminder in there as sort of, hey, don't hold us against us if we're falling under this department, because we still will have it based on the talent search eligibility requirements, which are based on this, this, and this. So, what we're saying is, look, if you're stuck in a situation where they're not going to change, they're going to use that title, then you will have to put in a couple of sentences to let the reader know, by the way, we're going to base it off of good old TRIO eligibility requirements based on low income and potential first generation college students only. No other preference will be given based on any other characteristic that the student may have. So you may have to put that in there. Worst case scenario, if you don't have any other way to, if that's what it's called, that's what it's called. If you don't,
Mhm.
it could be a red flag. Yes, like Teresa says, it could be.
Yes, I would add that term, the language that Lisa just said, definitely, just to make them
Mm-hmm,
aware that you're conscious of who the target population should be,
mm-hmm.
and that they don't get anything confused potentially. And then
Exactly.
the other element is you could always ask for permission to call it the Center for Access and Success, the Center for Access and Success, and see if your institution will allow for you to do it in this instance. So
Hmm.
there's
Hmm.
also that ask as well. And they may
Hmm.
say no, but they may say yes.
Hmm. Hmm. Definitely. But now's the time to have that conversation, instead of like, press for time. Oh my gosh, what do we do? Great question, because it's something to think about right now. Any other questions?
Yes, we have one more. So Jason has asked, you may have already answered this question, but if we want to add 2 more schools based on need, would you suggest adding them to our current grant or our current grant area served, or write a new one since we are going to need additional staff to cover them?
Well, you can't have it though well, you could after funding. I guess it all depends at your target area, but you could always add schools to an existing grant. I mean, you're more likely you have it is let me start over. It is so it's going to be so hard to get a new talent search funded for so many reasons. And you've always heard this, but I'm serious. I will pass out if we get any new ones funded. Okay. I really will. So you're a couple of things. You can go ahead, and if you're wanting to serve those schools, you'd probably if you add them to your existing grant, they better show need across the board in every category. If those 2 schools are not showing need in one of the categories, don't put them on there. And on a map, I mean, are they part of the target area anyway? If those 2 new schools are part of your target area already, then the question is, well, do you need to list them as official target schools? Remember, you can still go to target schools that are not official target schools as long as they're still in the target area and you don't go to them as often as you go to your target schools. But if they're in a different direction, like geographically, if they're in a different city or a totally different target area, then you probably are stuck having to try to write a new talent search to serve them. But it'll be a miracle if it gets funded. Okay. It has to score a perfect score. And even with a perfect score, you may not get funded for a couple of years at best case scenario. It's just super, super hard. So again, if you're going to add them to the existing one, they better show need across the board. But you know what? If you put them on their separate grant, and if those 2 schools do not show need across the board, and you can't show that you have at least 3 times of what you need, like for a bare minimum for a new talent search, you have to serve 500 a year. So I have to show that I have at least 1,500 eligible students to pick from. And in reality, when you start up and running, you need a pool of at least 15 eligible to get your 500. On that second new grant, do you have enough at those target schools, at least 1,500? And those 2 target schools have to show need across the board. You can't afford to lose a single point. I know, some people have expanded their target area in the first one to try to cover that other area, and get it, or if, but you can't, your institution cannot submit, or agency cannot submit to multiple talent search programs for the same target schools. You could turn in 10 talent search proposals as long as they all serve different areas, but you also can't submit 2 different ones. Not that you were thinking about doing that, but I'm just saying, by accident, I knew someone who didn't know that you couldn't do that. And we found out about it just in time before they kind of ruined it for themselves. But it's a big decision to add or reduce. And you got to look at all the stats to see if it's best for them to be separate on their own and take a risk, or to add them to your existing one. Or the question is, do I need to add them? If they're in the target area, they could just be our unofficial targets. They can be they could be non-target schools in the target area, and they don't have to be mentioned at all in the grant. Teresa, I don't know if you have anything to add to that about adding 2 new schools.
No, you covered everything.
Okay. Any other
Um,
questions?
so one question came up about EO language, and did you
Uh-huh.
want to speak further to what we have available in the Google Drive?
Yes, in the Google Drive, I believe, if I remember correctly, You might have to help me because it's so small here. We've got a couple of documents here. I think we have that terminology. I think you asked me for that, Teresa, initially. It's kind of like the or you might have provided it to us, some information, buzzwords or key terminology to be aware of, right?
Yes, it's on
Okay.
the screen. I do see it.
Okay, great. Yes. So it's listed there in the Google Drive. You might want to check it out. I know that the COE also last week mentioned to do an assessment of your current proposal and your programming. You might want to check that out, what they have listed, plus look at some of the terminology here and go through. In fact, that's what we're at NEC have been doing the last month is we've been going through people's institutions submitted proposals, and we're going through page by page of the proposal and highlighting it compared to that list, finding anything that might fall into the DEI or the executive order language. And there's a couple of them. There's what's the number, Teresa? I should have memorized it, 14 or something. The DEI one, and there's also one revoking, English as, well, it's now, English is the official language, right? So a lot of the proposals we were reading were talking about ESL and all these other extra services. So we had to be very careful to reword those in a certain way. Cultural is another thing that might come up. Minority, some of us are using that terminology. Gosh, I was just looking at this last night, Teresa. I don't know if that, well, it's in that document. All those are the buzzwords you need to kind of go through your proposal and see if you can rephrase that term if you can. I think somewhere I saw that, a lot of people were saying preference is not a good word anymore. Preference would be given to, for example, SSS students in awarding financial aid or scholarships. And that was a big no-no. We had to say, well, it's got to be based on their low income status, and being potential first generation. And we had to clean it up a bit. So that's what I would look at. And where it's really going to come into play, in the needs section, no longer should you have additional data regarding the academic performance of certain groups of students. Like I used to always, because I found that the stats were worse for Hispanic males. So I would bring that up. If you think that's bad for the whole school graduation rate, I used to add it on as another punch, basically to say more alarming is the dropout rate or the graduation rate for Hispanic males. I'm not going to go there anymore in the needs section. In the plan of operation, my plan to identify, recruit, and select, I'm not going to specifically call out certain groups or clubs or organizations of certain groups of students, as I did before, possibly to say this where we go to identify. And also in my programming, I'm not going to mention like ESL or services, unless they're, because remember, I believe those are either provided by state or local laws. I might state that, but I try to stay out of that. And then the big time in the quality of personnel. Now that's going to be very interesting because the second question, the quality of personnel, is all about the applicant's plan to hire, identify, recruit, and hire individuals that have, it says similar experience. So I don't think the question itself, Teresa, when I looked at the question, I was like, the question isn't so bad, but in all these years, our response has been heavy on preference and consideration. And I think in the past, because of the way I know it's been written when I inherited grants and just piggybacked on that, it was very strong, or it got away from, we just need to go back to stating that we're looking for individuals that have experienced the same educational and economical setbacks as eligible talent search and EOC participants. They're not going to have time I don't think they're going to have time to change the regulations, Teresa, to rewrite that second part of the question. So I think the question is going to stay, but our response has to be very, for lack of a better word right now, guarded, or very looked at and said, what? I never thought about this being an issue before. I'm struggling with that. Usually that's the first template I have done, Teresa, for clients to work off of. And now I'm struggling with it because I'm like, I got to think about my response. So it's not so much the question, but it's our response. And that's really where you need to be very, very careful with that response. I don't know if you want to add to that, because that's my biggest headache.
Yeah, no, you're correct. And then also I wanted to add, you had asked about the executive order, the one that's heavily focused on DEI, and that's Executive Order 14151.
Okay.
And I am looking for the other one with regards to English as the primary language.
You know, it was actually with that one, it's interesting that it's an executive order, but it was revoked. So
It's revoking.
yeah, it's revoking. So it's so, you know, yeah. So I forget what the original one said, but then it was revoked. So now, you know, it's the official language. So just beware of, some of us have been around so long that we've inherited proposals where sometime in the, you know, in the 80s mainly, it shifted over to be very you know, not on purpose, but just the way things were, to be shifted toward, oh, well, you know, if they're from a Hispanic background or African American background, because of the neighborhood, we want to give preference. And we didn't think twice about it, right? You know, we just got so used to it. Now, you know, we get into now the current state of things where we have to rethink that and say, you know, we got to give this a whole new, from a different viewpoint. And we will still, you know, we still want to identify, recruit, and select individuals who have the experiences that our students have. But we have to stress the low income and the educational attainment experience, and not accidentally, maybe not meaning to, make it sound like we are shifting toward a particular type of group based on ethnic background, and things like that. So, are there any other questions?
And there was a follow-up one, and this is a good, really good question. In the needs section, can we use economically disadvantaged as a group to include in our data?
What do you say, Teresa?
So I know that I've used that language because that's how the state actually analyze their data. I think the biggest component is really staying focused on low income and first gen and using that as your primary language because it's statutory. And then, of course, when you initially, what we've been suggesting to people is when they do state that they're focused on low income, they're targeting low income and first generation students initially in the proposal or in the even in the needs section, that they specifically cite the statute so that, you know, so that we're, because the conflict is with the statute and we need to stay in alignment with the statute. Um,
Mhm, mhm.
so the word economically disadvantaged is not a bad word. However, you want to stay as close, you want to focus on the statutory language so that you can cite it.
Correct. And if you notice, when you go back and double check me, somebody there check me, I don't think the talent search and EOC regulations. It doesn't. We've come up with that. We use that, but it doesn't. It never states economically disadvantaged. Double check me.
Mhm.
It's just something that we've inherited and we add on. So I say you can still get your point across by not using that. If you, I wouldn't use it. I would say those students who are low income, like Teresa said, and potential first generation college students, there's a high number and percentage of them. And then if you don't want to keep using that same long title, then just refer to the project will serve or seek to identify those that are EOC eligible, talent search eligible. And I would stay away from using that language. It's not actually cited anywhere in our TRIO. I don't think in the program application as a definition, or in the regulations. It may be listed in Gear Up and some other things that we inherited and just thought to add on there because that's what we were in, you know, in a different time we were wanting to stress. But now it's always been, once they're eligible for, you know, we can keep using that language over and over again. And it should shorten up your narrative too if you just keep saying talent search eligible, EOC eligible. And I get what you're saying about, you know, in some parts, when you're collecting the data for all your target schools, the data is supposed to be based on that whole school, which if that whole school is struggling and most of them are on free and reduced lunch, then the whole school's already, you could say, is economically disadvantaged, although I won't use that term. I do know that if you notice in Talent Search, in the needs section, they want to ask the participation of low income and first generation students in rigorous secondary school program of studies. That's the only time they really specifically funnel in on, tell us just about the low income first generation students in this one area. The rest of it's supposed to be for the whole school. But if you find yourself in a situation where you can't show need, for everybody, that might be a Hail Mary, so to speak, where you say, you know what, the whole school's not showing a need. What if I just pulled it for just low income first generation students or low income students? You may have to do that, but you'll have to explain to the reader that the data pulled is for just the low income students at the high school. Okay, not for everybody at the high school. You have to be clear with that. I would only do that if I had to. Any other questions?
No, there's some more questions.
Okay. Well, thank you all so much. I hope this was helpful, Teresa. I can't tell you how thankful I am that you were able to do that because I'm doing it this way. I can't see any of the Q&A like I typically can. Thank you all so much for your
Lisa,
great questions. Yes.
Can you provide them with, someone that asked a question earlier about the services that you provide related to technical review of grants? So can you give them, tell them where they can find that information?
Yes. And I think you can see it on our website. You can go to our NEC shop also. So go to our website and you can either check our tab that says the services we provide for proposal technical review, or go straight to the shop. The one that I think most people will probably benefit from, again, it's an unallowable cost, but we do have hourly consultation to help you assess, collect, and review your needs section data. And that's under the data technical review services. We do also have some slots open for technical reviews of your whole proposal and also of proposal development. And so you can get that information from our website. Dawn is also going to put that link for our website in the chat. And also we'll put the info email so you can email us directly. Okay.
And that's it.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Teresa. Thanks, Donna. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week and we'll get the recording out sometime tomorrow. Thank you all. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you, ladies. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. I got to go in. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye.